Welcome. You're in session BUS 204, so if you're looking for something else, it's not here. Welcome to this session. My name's Dave Thompson. I've got Cesar Tirado with me. I'll get him to introduce himself in a minute. Well, you could introduce myself if you like, but look, last time I did a tech ed presentation was about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was showing lots of code. That's when I used to work for Microsoft. There's going to be no code today, so if you're looking for code, there's another session over in NZ1. This session is very business focused on application of business intelligence and data warehouse solutions within BNZ. So my name's Dave Thompson. I manage the BI team within BNZ. I've been there about 6 months. Prior to that, I worked for a software vendor actually that runs this conference, Microsoft, for about 12 and a half years. And after that, between there and coming to BNZ, a software company called Warescape that produced a product called Red for data warehousing, and then came on here. So that's a little bit about me. Before we get on to the actual session, I'll get Cesar to introduce himself.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. My name is Cesar Tirado, as Dave mentioned before. I'm the BI Solutions Architect for the BNZ. Been working with the BNZ for just about a couple of years now. And as Dave, I also have a software development background, so I've done a lot of coding in the past. And, this is my first ticket compared to Dave. So I'm just conscious of that. I've got no demos because they never go wrong, but just in case. So, yeah,
okay.
Let's go with the agenda.
Fantastic. Now, what we're going to try and do, I know these sessions run for about an hour, and usually people run out of time and there's never any time for questions. So we're going to try and finish a little bit early. We've practiced this. We hope we'll finish 5 minutes early and give you time for questions. Otherwise, Cesar and I are at the back at the end. So just moving forward, and the clicker doesn't work. There we go. Okay, we'll resort to the old way. Here we go. All right. We did test this before coming.
Oh, we thought we were going to get away with it without demos.
There we go. No. Right. What's happened to PowerPoint here? That's interesting. Yep. Battery.
Oh, turn it on.
Oh.
No? Moving on.
Okay, so here I'm just going to spacebar progress it. There we go. Okay, right. Now I know what I'm doing. Okay. Well, just you jinxed it, Cesar. I'm going to blame you for that. So we have four things in the agenda. First of all, I'm just going to cover an overview of who's who in the zoo, who we are at BNZ, what we do, and then Cesar's going to cover the journey around what we call the Business Intelligence Portal that we run a lot of our business, both front office and back office. Then I'll talk about some critical success factors in running a successful BI project and a successful BI team. And lastly, Cesar's going to finish up with talking about a future roadmap and a little bit about Power Pivot, because that's been talked about. Now, a little bit about who we are. BNZ, in fact, next year in 2011, we celebrate 150 years as a bank. Now, it's true, though, that a number of years ago, we did sell to National Australia Bank, so we are actually a fully owned subsidiary of the National Australia Bank, who are head office in Melbourne. Although we get quite a bit of autonomy from our parent, which is lovely. In fact, in a number of areas, we lead the way in terms of the sorts of things we do, and BI is one of those examples. We're one of only 7 banks in the world, I think it's 7, that have a AA credit rating from Standard & Poor's, so that's also quite a good thing, and around 5,000 employees for BNZ throughout the country. A couple of other things is, like a lot of large organisations that have been around for a while, we have quite a lot of large, complex systems to have to deal with. And if you're from a large organisation that had systems around for a while, that presents some special challenges. So we've got some mainframe banking systems that a lot of the big, what used to be called the 4 trading banks run, and I know the first line of assembly for that was written in 1967 and still runs. Now these things are very stable, trustworthy transactional banking systems, and people have confidence in those systems. So that's fantastic, but as you build on those things, you get a lot of complexity and a lot of different rules. And so trying to get at the data, it's very complex, and that's why we build a data warehouse. We also run HR and financials on SAP and have done since about 2003. In terms of some of the community things we do as a bank, You've probably heard of us in Super 14, and now Super 15, the big BNZ logo on the front of the shirts. You'll see staff wearing shirts, a bit of competition around teams. We have this thing called Closed for Good. Closed all the branches sometime last year for a whole day and spent some time in the community. The other one is a principal sponsor of Plunkett. So that's a little bit about who we are in case you're not aware of BNZ. Now in terms of some of the achievements of the BI team, one of the things that we're quite proud of is we're in some awards finals at the CFO conference back in March, April timeframe, and we were runner-up as Finance Team of the Year, but we did win the Project Initiative of the Year for Finance, so that was fantastic. We've also got a special relationship with the Microsoft folks. We participated in the Gemini TAP program. Gemini is just a code name around TAP program, Technology Adopter Program, for Power Pivot and SQL 2008 R2. We've had discussions at the SQL Pass 2010 conference around some of the work we've done, and Cesar and another colleague attended the BI conference in New Orleans back in June. Now, this relationship with Microsoft and doing quite a bit of work with them, we have actually ended up doing case study in print, but also video that's up on the website, and we thought we might just show that video now just to kind of give you a bit of a feel, because it's got our CFO, who I report to, Ken Christie, talking to you, a little bit of me after a bad cold, and one of my staff members. So if we could roll the video.
The video on the other screen.
Right. That
How
was
do we get the
interesting.
video over there? Find the trick.
This is where the man switches the screen. We actually did test this beforehand. Now, I was sitting in a session yesterday with some guys from Altus, and they were demoing Power Pivot, and it went horribly wrong, and I thought, well, we're not doing any demos tomorrow, so nothing will go wrong. So what we might do is come back to, because our tech guys just walked out of the room,
Yes.
we're going to come back to the video later. How's that for a recovery?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah?
So it's back to you again.
Oh, it's back to me again. Right, so a little bit about BI, because I think it's important to frame where business intelligence fits in BNZ. We are not part of our IT team. Our IT team, it's quite a big organisation, are based largely in Wellington, and they look after all the systems you'd expect, transactional banking systems, credit card systems, AS400, a bunch of different transactional banking systems. BI actually sits within finance. So I report to Chief Financial Officer at BNZ, a guy called Ken Christie, who's going to be in the video, and you might just get to see him before the close of this session. Now, although we sit in finance, the interesting thing is that our clients aren't just, or our customers aren't just finance. We have, our customers are right across the bank. The retail network, that's the frontline bankers, they use our portal every day, and Cesar will bring up some screenshots on the portal shortly. Our partner network, which looks after business, agriculture, farming, those sorts of clients, and risk, marketing, all facets of the business use various parts of the BI portal. So we sit in finance. It's about a team of roughly 50 people, and we've got a number of teams within there. I won't bore you with all the detail, but at a very high level we have 3 development teams. One there, that's the third one from the left, called Data Supply, and they look after what we call the Global Data Warehouse, which pulls all the information off SAP in the mainframe, and we stage that in, if you like, an operational data store. Then what happens is we have a team, it's the far left one now, data development, and that is our traditional development environment, Microsoft environment, using the Microsoft tools, SQL Server, Visual Studio, that sort of thing, and we produce the data warehouse there. We also have a team, data analytics, that do deep dive insight stuff. That is a bit of Microsoft stuff and a bit of non-Microsoft stuff. The reality is that most organisations live in a heterogeneous environment, so it's not purely one vendor or the other, but we work that reasonably well. And a couple of other parts of the business, a small piece to look after infrastructure around keeping stuff going, engaging with the business, so project management and your typical BA, business analyst, and some work around business process management. So that's a little bit about how we're organised in BI. Now, I think just, I want to use a banking term because it's important to put this up just to give some context to the sort of things we deal with and why we build solutions certain ways. And there's something within banking that we call the performance paradox. And a paradox is something where you have two or more conflicting objectives. And we've got three of them here. One of them is the top vertex of the triangle, cash earnings. Cash earnings is good, by the way. It's about revenue. It's about getting money in the door. How do we earn revenue? Primarily, it's through loans. So they're an asset on our book, and we earn interest, and it's the funding lending gap that we earn money on. It's also about bad and doubtful debt and so on. So we want to maximise cash earnings. I think any business would want to do that. Third one, return on equity. How much capital do we have in there? What's the return on equity? Where are we going to put our investments? That's also important. The third one's particularly interesting. Asset light side of the ledger is the loans, but important as well, and you'll see a lot of the banks competing in this space at the moment is term deposits, and these are our liabilities. So we need to get money in. We owe that to the people who deposit, so that's a liability. Now that's very important because the Reserve Bank puts certain conditions on us as a bank, and this has got, how shall we say it, more restrictive since the global financial crisis, around making sure you have what we call a core funding ratio. So customer funding is very important. You can't have bankers race out and just get lots of loans in the door, and therefore what you're getting is great revenue. That's no good if your funding book is rubbish. You can't just go and borrow all the money from the wholesale market. It's rather fragile. Reserve Bank wants to make sure a certain amount of your assets are covered by deposits that you have locally because they tend to be more stable. So how do you balance that performance paradox so that you're not maximising one at the expense of the other? And what we attempt to do with our portal is to deliver exactly that to the front line every day. So it's appropriate to kind of give you a bit of context around that. So I'm going to hand over to Cesar now. He's going to talk a little bit about the BI portal journey, and I'm looking desperately down at the tech guys in the back to see whether we roll the video now or later. And we're just going to have a quick look. Ignore the guy behind the curtain.
That's the video there. I haven't tried.
Oh, we can get it up. Oh, you just got an extended desktop.
There you go.
BNZ has been around for nearly 150 years. In fact, next year we've got our 150-year celebration, which is going to be a great year for all of us to have a great look at the history of the bank and what we've come from to what we are today. We've got about 180 stores across the whole of New Zealand. And fortunately for us, we've come through the global financial crisis in a great position. In fact, there's only 7 AA rated banks globally, and we're one of those banking groups that's one of those AA's. Business Intelligence Centre is really a tool that we use, a portal that allows all of our frontline bankers essentially to understand what we call the performance paradox, which is managing our cash earnings, managing return on equity, and managing our customer funding. And it's really the combination of those three. And what the portal allows us to do is to take all that information and using a Microsoft suite of products, which we've been working closely with Microsoft, it allows the front line to have virtually immediate profitability understanding for all their customers at the end of the week, which was really unheard of 3 years ago.
SQL Server has been a product that we've been working on for quite a number of years, starting off originally being a database fundamentally, but now what we have done is added a whole lot of rich functionality and features to it. The beauty of some of the features like Power Pivot is that you can publish up the business intelligence. You can have one view of the truth in the organization, and then the users can use tools they're familiar with to actually look at that information. You can run this using your existing systems and layering on top. You don't have to rip out the existing infrastructure you have. You can build all of this functionality around it, enabling administrators to centrally manage, centrally support multiple data centers is one of the key features in SQL Server 2008 R2.
Some of our challenges are we're faced with quite a few legacy systems, some large complex transactional source systems like the mainframe banking system, SAP, credit card systems and so on. And we've built a data warehouse on top of that. But one of the key challenges is how can we more readily enable our end users to do self-service business intelligence. The key thing here in business intelligence is overcoming issues with complexity. There are so many different complex source systems, and understanding all the nuances of the data is very difficult, and you very quickly reach the limitations of traditional self-service tools like Excel on its own. But when combined with Power Pivot and some of the services and modelling it provides on top of SharePoint, it really starts to open up all sorts of opportunities.
Power Pivot is really, really exciting because what it does is it puts the power of analysis services in the hands of the business user. And the business user is actually able to do quite complex reports at the time that they want to, because it's a tool that's actually available to them easily within a very familiar environment, which is Excel 2010.
With infrastructure behind it like SharePoint 2010 and SQL 2008 R2, you get a manageable infrastructure with usage, with tracking, but you also get much more powerful tools in front of the end user to do much more complex, sophisticated analysis over a vast amount of data.
I think technology is always leading the edge, and I think for us we've just always got to constantly remind ourselves it's the business driver that's going to get us to the result. The technology is the enabler, but the business driver is critical. And I think sometimes technology teams, and not so much at our bank because we've got the two teams merged, but they do technology for technology's sake. And in our case, we're absolutely business driven on what we're trying to achieve.
We need to really understand that, sure, this is great use of Microsoft technology, and it is good use of Microsoft technology, but it's the combination of the people in the organisation who have the foresight to use it, which is why it's so exciting. Technology is great, but when you've got people with incredible business acumen and desire to improve how their customers' experiences, that's when you get the ideal synergy.
SQL Server 2008 R2 delivers several breakthrough capabilities that will enable your organisation to scale database operations with confidence, improve IT and developer efficiency, enabling high scalable and well-managed business intelligence on a self-service basis for your users.
Excellent. Quite glad that finally worked. Now I know what you guys are thinking. You know, solutions architect couldn't figure out it was on the other screen. I'm a BI solutions architect, not a media, so solutions architect. So I didn't see that one coming. Yes. So okay. So I'm going to cover the BI journey at the BNZ, more particularly about our portal, BI portal. So you've heard from Ken Christie and Dave. They talked about the performance paradox, and very much how is it that BI adds value to the business to be able to provide that particular tool to the front line. So I'm going to show you. I couldn't find recollections back to 2005 for BNZ. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of background to this. So as it was mentioned before, we are a subsidiary of the National Australian Bank. So in saying so, most of our operational data, and in fact the global data warehouse, sits up in Melbourne. So that itself represented quite a few challenges for us right from the beginning. Back in 2005, the finance department only had a group of reports called the Performance Pack. These reports were just a group of static web reports that were produced, massaged, and aggregated in Australia. So it was pretty much a black box, and they were not delivered to the business up until day 15. Now this is business day 15. This is 3 weeks into the month. By the time the decision makers got this data, the data was so out of date that it just contributed to the lack of use and poor decision making. So around 2006, there was a big decision made for performance management reporting to be a business drive. So a project was put together to start bringing some of that information over to New Zealand. So all the aggregated data was now held locally, and that provided the BI function to produce more dynamic reporting for the end user, understand the data, understand the business needs, allow the synergy of the two teams to put more dynamic reporting, be able to analyze the information across from the different business units. Now that the process was brought to our side of the fence, now we could deliver in day 10. But this wasn't good enough. The business needed to have more insight to the information and more readily time. So around 2007, the next big step was taken to bring the non-aggregated data locally to New Zealand. Now with a very talented group of web developers and the ability to have all these very detailed raw data on our side, we were able to facilitate to the end user more dynamic, interactive reporting. We put together, it was our second version of the online P&L, which is the ultimate tool that we were challenged by the business to be able to contribute or provide the end user the ability to align to the performance paradox and say, how can we provide a frontline staff the ability to interact with the data, analyze, monitor the customer sales, and all those different things on a day-to-day basis. So we produce, and you will see in the next slides, some snapshots of our online P&L. We produce some web report, dynamic web reporting that allow the end user not just to go through some parameterized filters, but now they could slice and dice the information in so many different ways. Different hierarchies, drill in and out from the information, and create and get far more insight on the data. But that wasn't enough, and a lot of different areas around the bank realized what we were doing for the finance department, and they say, well, we want to be part of that platform. We want to be part of that journey. They realized the synergy, the agility, and the power that we were providing to the end user, whether they could use that as well. And in 2009, we formed the BI Center of Excellence, which is the area that Dave now manages. So in doing that, because of the way we were presenting the information to the business, there was a lot more appetite for using our environment. There was a lot more users coming. There was a lot more information. But forming the BI CIE also brought into our BI world a lot more challenges. Now we had teams from risk, marketing, HR, some other couple of additional units coming into our umbrella with legacy systems, their own different types of ways of doing things, different applications, different data marts. So we started collecting all this amount of information, tool, cross skills, and knowledge that we didn't have before, but that now we needed to grab and do something about it towards the future. When we formed the BI Center of Excellence, we went through a few days of workshops with technical people both from BI and technology to define what was going to be our roadmap. Because now we were not just doing a departmental BI, we were talking about enterprise-wide solution. So we made a conscious decision of these are the legacy systems that we have. What is the technology that is going to enable us to grow going forward? And I'll show you the tools that we ended up selecting then. So now in 2010, we are growing and benchmarking ourselves in terms of our maturity as a BI function. And we have reached the point, we believe, to go for self-service, enabling self-service BI for the end user and most of our critical decision makers and power users. So just in terms of our BI portal. So this is not our BI portal. This is probably one of the first online P&L reports that we put together a while ago. So back in 2007, a lot of rich information for the end user, relatively static. They could only change the date, and they could only jump from one report to another. So was the technology that was available at the time? It was as much as we could do for them. But then we went and developed an in-house application written in .NET with an environment, given that by then we already had unaggregated data on our side. Now we could provide far more rich experience for the end user. So we provided the user with a set of tools up in the right-hand side corner where they could slice and dice the information at different levels of hierarchy, not just time, but hierarchies. They could also change dynamically the ratios for their KPIs, so those color boxes, they will change dynamically. So this tool goes out to the bankers at every single branch to make decisions. So this, again, comes back to the synergies of BI and the business. The business asks us, how can we empower the frontline bankers to contribute to our performance paradox? So this is the tool that we provide them, and this is what they use on a day-to-day basis. So just recently we developed this as the new look of our BI portal. Now, you'll realize it looks very futuristic, and it's probably something that you don't really expect of a BI portal. But it's written in Silverlight, and there's a twofold story on why we want the BI portals to look like this for the BNZ. We know very well that success on BI and the data warehouse is usability. So if you don't get your users to actually use your data and use your tools, then you're not succeeding. So by 2009, we already knew that the business were working together with us to get, and we were already providing value and adding value to the organization with the tools, group of tools that we had. But we wanted to have an environment that was enjoyable for the end user to come back, a much better experience in reporting and analyzing the data. So we were not just looking at data insights, but also in the user experience. So we provided a bunch of widgets at the bottom where they can pretty much build up a sort of a dashboard thing, where they can add different bits and pieces they want to have the first time. So for each user, we have a profile. So every user has its own profile. And as you would expect from Silverlight, it will give you all sorts of additional functionality and animation and interactivity. You get pop-up windows that show you more insight on the information that you want to look at. But in the BI team, we don't stop there. It's not just, this is what we call sexy BI, by the way. But we don't stop just there. It's not just, if we are working with the business, we don't want just the business to get an insight on the information, but we also want to give them an insight on the processes. So we have an additional tool, which we call it iStatus. And this tool is an operational tool for us in the BI team. And basically, if you see the second screen in the middle, each box is a process in our data warehouse. And this drives end-to-end process for daily, weekly, or monthly processes. So we understand how the data warehouse is being put together and where the processes are at when they are running. Most importantly, and I mentioned it before, we now deliver for the business day 5. The only way we could deliver day 5, this is financial month-end reporting. The only way we could deliver day 5 is by integrating our processes with the business processes. So the business understands the very first screen, which is I need to commit and complete these particular tasks in this order, and these are my dependencies. I have a group of SLAs. I want to know when it's done. I want to know what's missed in SLA. Each individual task in that process actually reflects a process on our operational environment. The far window at the back is a particular task where we track not just when it ran, whether it was successful or completed, but we have a lot of information there as to what is this task doing, what are the dependencies upstream and downstream. It's got a whole bunch of notifications going on. So this is, again, the best way we can work with the business is by working together, getting that synergy going, and getting that full integration with them. So what's our architecture? well, this is very high level.
This is the non-technical view, right?
Yeah, very non-technical view. It wasn't supposed to be a technical session. But really, we don't do anything else different than anybody else. So we've got complex data sources coming in, the global data warehouse that feeds the MARDs, and then we populate that data to the portal. So we want to believe that our story is a successful story. And as I said, there's been a lot of challenges, but a lot of good decisions that we have made. And there's been a lot of technologies that we have been acquiring and using and inheriting. So this slide is about the technology that have enabled us to reach to our success story.
Oh, Cesar, I can't believe you've got an Oracle, a logo, and a Microsoft presentation.
Oh, no.
What are you going to do about that?
I thought it was the other slide. Did you bring the other slide? No?
No, Oracle does have a part to play. It's called a heterogeneous environment.
Look, my presentation is not getting any better. Yes, so, well, we cannot deny that there are those technologies out there in the market, and as part of the formation of BI Centre of Excellence, we inherited a lot of legacy systems and applications that run on those technologies. So now we don't just have to support our technologies, but we also have to take those technologies. Now, so when we started the BI Centre of Excellence, I made a commitment to my manager and to my team. We're going to simplify our environment. We're going to go with a particular platform of choice. So this is how I see our technology roadmap going forward. I know where those technologies are going to sit. So we made a conscious decision to use and focus on the BI and the SQL Server BI suite. So we use SQL Server for most of all our data marts, and especially frontline online P&L and every other application that we produce. We have analysis services for all the OLAP cubes, SSIS for data integration, very powerful tool for data integration, and Report Builder, which is the tool that we currently have for the end user to produce their own reports. We also made a choice of using Wordscape Red to be able to produce rapidly and together with the business the data marts and solutions that they need. So very user-friendly. And obviously, Visual Studio Silverlight tools for putting together our BI portal. Yes, so that's this part. Back to Dave, and hopefully you don't have any horrific slides showing up.
I do know that Cesar came up here at lunchtime and changed the slides, so I'm not quite sure what to expect next. The tech guy was not, there wasn't another problem. Someone had left the jacket here. So, look, what I want to do now is just spend a little bit of time, talk a little bit about who we are, a little bit about our journey, a little bit about some of the technologies that we use at a very high level. That doesn't just all happen automatically. There are, in building any great software solutions, and I'm not saying everything we've done is great, but there's some very good stuff there. We've got more to do. There are some key critical success factors. And what I want to do now is, in any project, well, they usually have a top 10 list. I've got a top 7 list. There are lots of different factors, but I've picked on 7 that I think have been really critical for us at BNZ and relate more to a data warehousing type project. So it doesn't mean other factors are not important. First one is, I'll start with this one. And this might sound a little bit textbook 101. And we all know that you need smart people to build cool software, functional software. And most of us are aware of the importance of this thing called teamwork. There are plenty of books on this too. There are lots of self-help books on this stuff. The interesting thing about this is we all know this, but in my experience it still remains a very elusive attribute of most projects. And to do this topic justice, you'd have to spend a whole session on it, but given it's tech ed, not a management conference, we won't do that. Time constraints, I just want to say 2 things about team culture. First, in my experience, it is the most important factor in determining long-term sustainable success. The second thing is there are lots of good books and people with theories on this, and you could read that they've been out for a long time. There was that one by Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister back in the 80s called Peopleware. It's very good. There's a lot of these things around. The best one I've come across has got nothing to do with technology, and it's a management fable, and it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by a guy called Patrick Lencioni. It's about a 2-hour read. I think it's fantastic for this sort of stuff. Not saying that we're perfect with the culture at BNZ. It takes perseverance and some hands-on leadership, but I think we're making some pretty good progress. So that's team culture. The next one is almost as elusive as the first one, and that is executive sponsorship and quality of that. And what the heck does executive sponsorship mean anyway? And how do you know that it's not just a rubber stamp? The problem, I think, is that a lot of the sponsors who fund your projects don't really have the time, or if we're really honest, the interest to spend with you in sufficient detail for you to build something that meets what they think they want, or what they thought they want, because that's not always clear. And yet, what's also interesting is we are the eternally optimistic developers that let them off the hook from the start. It's a very subtle thing. If your sponsor only has peripheral involvement in the project, this is an early warning sign of likely failure. Get them more involved or run away and find another project. And I've got to say, we have done that a little bit at BNZ. Particularly in our model within the Centre of Excellence, we are free. In finance, we don't charge for our time. Technology does. We are looking at charging for time because you get an interesting supply and demand curve happening if you're free. There's always over-demand and not enough supply. So it's important that you have got a worthwhile project with a project sponsor that wants to be successful with you. I can't overemphasize that enough. Not quite ready. Got my demo dolly ready to progress. There's a couple of things I want to say about it. Sorry, Cesar. I got called that once years ago. I've always wanted to get someone back for that. Look, I just want to say I have seen so many projects stutter on because of this. There's a former guy I once saw when I worked at Microsoft back when I started in 1995, a guy called Jim McCarthy, and he talked about 21 great rules of software development. And one of the things he said, and he said a lot of great things, is projects slip one day at a time. They slip one day at a time. You don't wake up the next day and find, oh, we've slipped 6 months, unless you haven't had your hand on the pulse. That's true, but also maintain that your relationship with your sponsor slips one day at a time. And then you wake up from your slumber and you've got a big issue. And they don't think what you've done is what they thought they wanted. Get this right and you'll usually find your requirements are more stable. I'm not saying you get utopia, you don't get perfection. They're better defined, you're less susceptible to scope creep, all that sort of stuff, and you've got a better chance of delivering on time. It's not guaranteed though, but a better chance. Ready? Fantastic. The next thing, role of the architect. Now, who went to Tom Hollander's session on Monday? Anyone? Right, okay. He gave a talk on Monday and he touched on this, and I thought, right on, this guy has got it right. He said something, he said architects need to write code. Now this is a little bit controversial. However, I tend to agree with him. We have, in my view, it's just my view, Dave's view, that we have too many architects that are not hands-on technical enough. And too many of them seem to operate in a parallel universe to developers. And they tolerate each other, but that's about it. This leads on to the next point. Test the architecture early, because you can't test the architecture on a whiteboard. And the point I want to say is there's no point having a grandiose whiteboard architecture if it's not pragmatic. It needs to be pragmatic. It needs to be understood. It needs to be supportable, and it can't drive the developers nuts trying to work around it. That's why I think the architect needs to be able to write code. That's not to say they are the main developer. I think a really good contribution is early on, where you've got the architect who's thinking through security, thinking through scalability, loose coupling, tight coupling, ETL, designability, all that sort of stuff, that they take a slice of the application, a deep slice that carves through all the different layers, and build some of that code. In our case, it might be some ETL code, or some .NET Silverlight code, or some code around managing security, that sort of thing. And they should do that, and they should test it to see that it's not too cumbersome, that it does scale, that it's supportable, that it's not going to take the developers 3 years to build something that should take much less because it's too over-engineered. So it's got to be horses for courses in my view. A pragmatic architect is a good choice for doing this because they need to eat their own dog food, right? They need to do that, and I think you can then establish patterns and templates that can get refined before too many other developers get into the kitchen and do their stuff and then change everything. So I think that's really important. So that's point 4 I want to make. Agile. Now, I don't have any particular religious views about Agile versus Waterfall. Both have pros and cons. But I do want to make a few comments. In BI land, I think Agile tends to be a better approach, but there are a few caveats and warnings. Mostly because it's unreasonable to expect that your customers, your users, know everything up front before you start building what you're building. Now, that's true of other software projects, I know. But in BI land, I think it's more true. It holds an even stronger relationship with that. And why is that? Because when you're building a data warehouse, you don't know enough about, you're so dependent on these other complex source systems. And if you're really honest, no one has a bloody clue about the detailed data and little business rules. And you have to actually start building something. You have to pull data through and look at it to see if what they want is even possible. So you've got to start pulling it through and inspecting it. So you have to build something before the requirements are completely known. So that's more true, I think, in BI than a traditional transactional system where you are creating the source data often. Get my point? So BI Agile is more appropriate there. However, I do have a word of warning about Agile. I thought he was going to get on the change the thing here. So one thing I want to say is don't let it become an excuse for no process and no documentation. If you hear that excuse, then be afraid. Be very afraid. And Tom Hollander talked about, he came up with this term on Monday, he said, just enough documentation. And I think that's quite cool. That's what we like about Westgate Red, actually. It produces this code in the SQL Server environment for us, and it's all self-documenting. It's all about metadata, and it works quite well. Now, so it's just enough documentation. But here's the last point I want to say about Agile. More important than the Agile religion, or the waterfall religion, if I can use that word, I hope no one takes offence, is experience. I will always take an experienced project manager, regardless of their methodology bias, because they usually have a sense of where the snakes are in the grass, ready to bite you. And Agile snake bites can be just as painful as waterfall snake bites. My view is avoiding the snakes altogether is better, and that's where there's no substitute for experience. So, up to number 6. You can't talk about BI and data warehousing without talking about data quality. And the goal of data warehousing, I think, is you try and pull through all that data from all the source systems where you might have the same customer represented twice, you might have transactions that span source systems, is you want to get something that's consistent, you want to get a single version of the truth. Now, we tend to find when you pull data from complex source systems, if you've got data quality problems, they tend to get amplified. Has anyone found that? And by that I mean if you've got a bank teller, and I'm picking on a banker, working on something, I'm not saying they are any more remiss than any other information worker, but if they're working on a customer record, right, they might not think about the consequences of entry of a certain attribute, like industry code. It might not be that relevant to data entry, because on that one record it kind of doesn't really matter. But when you pull through millions of records and you start to slice and dice by that sort of those sorts of measures, then you've got a big issue. You can't rely on it being right anymore. So the challenge, it's a big challenge for us at BNZ. If we're all honest, it's a big challenge at lots of organisations. The key here is really to try and ensure it gets fixed at source. There are things that happen downstream to fix it by changing things, but you keep doing it many times over, and the cost is much greater than fixing it at source. But it's really hard fixing it at source if you haven't got, if you don't have you don't have that sort of access to the source systems. So make no mistake though, the data quality issues can severely tarnish the reputation and integrity of your data warehouse. Even though it isn't your fault, it tarnishes your magnificent project. And this comes back to point number 2, having strong executive sponsorship to make sure they are committed to go back and change the source. And you've got bankers or airline workers or other frontline customer services reps who understand in their KPI that data quality is important. You've got to have that executive sponsorship. You've got to get them to take it seriously. My last one, number 7, post-implementation reviews. What I just want to say is how many people talk about these and think it's a great idea but never quite get around to doing them? Yeah, because you're on to the next gig, next project. So when I started at the BNZ, we had a project that was late. Everyone has projects that are late. And we're at the risk of similar sort of things happening to another project. We didn't really have time to do a post-implementation review, but in a sense, we didn't have time not to do one. And we did this thing. It was 49 pages. We've got someone independent, and they interviewed a lot of people. And it is important to get someone independent who doesn't have a fixed interest around the outcome of that. And there are lots of interesting lessons learned from that, for me anyway. And the interesting thing was that most of the things they came up with actually came back to the classic causes of project management failure, which the Standish Group highlight in their reports. And in fact, some of them are in here. In fact, the number one that they talk about is lack of quality executive sponsorship. So those are not all the factors, but I think they are really particularly important in the world of BI. So I'll stop my little preaching and we'll talk about some more interesting stuff and talk about the future.
Yes, thanks, Dave. Look, yes, our future roadmap, and I'll talk to you about a little bit about Power Pivot. So we decided to use for the BI COE always benchmark ourselves towards a goal, to have a mature BI environment that is flexible, scalable, that data has got as much integrity as the business needs it. And so it's about how we mature over time and how we add value to the business. So we've done a few of these things already, not in that particular order, but that's how they contribute to adding value. So from the formation of the Center of Excellence, we made a conscious decision, what's going to be our technology footprint, a platform that is scalable, that is going to cope with the growth and the demand. We're still working through the conversions and rationalization of the different marks and the different technologies that we currently have in terms of providing the different areas of the business with insights to the data and the BI solution. And the most important one is the business alignment. So I could say that the first 3 we have covered pretty much in its entirely, but most important than anything else, which is the second point that Dave mentioned, is sponsorship, which is our business alignment. So we are completely aligned to the strategy of the bank in terms of what projects we put through, how we contribute, and we add value to the organization. There is no one decision that is made without going through the BI portal or the BI tools that we use. It's providing the business with the insights that they need and the knowledge of the information. It's interesting, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, that every time you go into a new project, with no requirements, and it's only until you start looking through the information and getting the business to understand the data that they actually know what is it that they need and how they could use that data for making better decisions. So in terms of driving our maturity model forward, is the next, the last piece of the puzzle there is empowerment. And empowerment is about giving the business the ability to self-service themselves with BI functionalities, and also about collaboration of that information. So now we're talking about what technology, what can we provide to the end user, what platform would allow us to give to the end users to do insight analytics, create their own dashboards, or just simply go through millions of rows down to the desktop, understand the data, build models, and start collaborating with the peers to be able to make decisions. So a roadmap for that, again, we started off with SQL Server and the SQL BI suite. But since we got into the Microsoft TAP program last year, that's when we saw this is the tool that we want to use, Power Pivot and SharePoint. So SharePoint comes with Performance Point, which allows you to build dashboarding, KPI reporting, scorecards, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the tool that we needed for the Power users. And obviously Power Pivot, which will allow the end user to not just consume the data from our warehouse, but also data that they get from other sources. There was one of the sessions a couple of days ago was mentioned that the world of the decision maker, the desktop, is never going to change. It doesn't matter how much data they can get from the existing systems. There's always additional data that they get that the IT department or our department will never get to. There's data that comes from external sources for the decision makers to complement their decision process. So we needed to have a tool that will allow them to consume our data, mix it with external sources, being able to put models together and come up with a solution. So that's very much the the Power Pivot story for the BNZ. So we had a big challenge. So far we've been providing data at the operational level and the strategic level, but for the tactical level sort of users, we didn't have a tool. But more, so we focused on a particular area of the bank, and this is reconciliation of the general ledger. So what these guys were doing, were pulling information not just from the data warehouse, but also from the source systems, and also from SAP, from the RGL system. So they were struggling. They have a process that was working for them, but it was a tedious process. It was a very complex process. As you will understand, pulling that into Excel and going through hundreds and thousands of rows doing VLOOKUPs, it was something that was working for them for a while, but it wasn't flexible enough. The other problem they had is that they could only reconcile to the GL level. They couldn't then have a discussion with the retail partners or the business partners and say, what you're looking in the online P&L actually reconciles with the GL. So they had this disparity of situation. So we got the people from Microsoft involved, and they helped us put together a solution. And the solution was bring all those sources into Power Pivot. We also had the ability now to add to the model the ability for the end user to not just go to GL level, but also go down to business unit level. So now you have not just the decision makers in the back office, but also people on the front line have the ability to investigate this data, drill down to the level of the, either the branch or the particular business unit, and compare that and ensure that the information actually aligns and reconciles with what they do day to day in terms of what they're trying to achieve for the organization. So we put a final line down there, be careful. Why we do that? Because we've had a lot of talks, both nationally and internationally with people that we have met in terms of how you guys are going to use Power Pivot, how do you see it working in the future. And it's all these talk about giving so much power for the end user, and then you have all these spreadsheets pouring all over the place. Our vision of Power Pivot for BNZ BI is this is going to be the tool that will empower the end user to build models of the data they understand and they know. Because we work closely with the business, once they understand the data and they are confident that they've got to a solution that they want to use as a day-to-day basis and as a tool for decision making and so on, we will take that off them and we will productionize it and make it part of our platform in the BI team. So we're going to be using Power Pivot as a rich tool to empower the end user to understand the data and build models But after that, it comes to the BI team. So that's the only note that we wanted to make right at the end. And that's very much the last slide from us. So I don't know how are we with time?
We're 3 minutes for questions, but Troy is wanting to get up. I'm sure he's going to give me a hard time soon. But if there are any questions for Cesar or himself?